What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I have a special guest on the channel, Rudy Wade. He played this interesting and unique Naganadel GX control deck to Atlantic City Regionals, and he placed in the top 64 after making day 2. And since this deck is definitely rogue and different from other Naganadel GX based decks we've seen, like the Naganadel Checkmate deck created by Xander Perot, I figured this was a good deck to spotlight, and Rudy is on the line right now. Rudy, what's up? You want to introduce yourself?
Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm Rudy. I run the YouTube channel Rudy Wade TCG, and I do meta discussions and player interviews over there, kind of similar to this channel. But if you want some additional content, you can go check me out there. I also have a Twitter. It's at Rudy Wade Music. It's linked down here. And if you want to find me on Facebook or any of the Facebook groups, it's just Rudy Wade.
Cool, cool. And how long have you been playing Pokemon TCG, Rudy?
So I think competitively 2 years, and then maybe like a year or a half year before that.
Word. And are you going for the invite this year?
I don't know. Still undecided. It depends on how Knoxville goes, I guess, because the London flight is kind of the only thing holding me back. But we'll see.
Yeah, I feel that. Okay, so Naganadel Control, this deck is very different. It actually does not play any Stinger GX Naganadel. It's all about the Ultra Conversion Naganadel. Why don't you tell me the general strategy of this deck?
Well, basically, it's actually very similar to Pidgeotto control, where you're trying to hand lock your opponent. So the general strategy is to either have them get to one prize, and then you can lock something active, Chip, Ice X, Mars, Reset Stamp combo them in the same turn. Or you can just start working on their hand really early, and it doesn't really matter how many prize cards they have left, and you can hand lock them that way. Or another way you can handlock them is by Cold Crush GXing something that's already active with a lot of retreat in the active and locking it there and just like crushing hammer away their energy whenever they can attach it.
Cool. So it's also kind of similar to Zoroark Control, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's more similar to Zoroark Control because the draw engine's much more powerful than Pidgeotto. You're drawing somewhere between 6 and 9 cards per turn, which is like kind of what Zoroark was known for, just getting massive hand size. Like this deck gets like 20 card hands, and it really forces reset stamps out of your opponent, which is crucial because then they won't have them later on.
Okay, cool. So what is one of the biggest reasons to play this instead of Pidgeotto?
A main reason is that if you're in a situation where you need to attack, you have the option to play it as an attacking deck. It's like it's not the most efficient attacking deck, but it can still definitely get the job done. You have some strong attackers in there, like Baby Buzzwole puts in a lot of work on 4 prize turn. You also have the 170 snipe with Naganadel. I played 2 copies of Triple Excel just in case one's prized, or if you need to snipe something twice in a row. And also the Kartana is really good against grass weak Pokemon. Like Magikarp, Wailord, or Aerodactyl. You do need 2 energy to hit Aerodactyl, but it still knocks it out in one hit. And also, if you attach a Beast Energy, then you can one-shot stuff like Blacephalon and Heatran as long as they're active.
Cool, cool. So you do have a fair amount of energy in here compared to some of the other control decks. Why don't you tell me, how did this deck come up, and how did you start working with this deck? When did you start working with this deck?
So right before Worlds, I was kind of messing around with like the Alolan Executor Rowlet deck, and it was just going really bad. The deck's terrible. Uh, and then as I was playing it against one of my what do you call it? Features on my YouTube channel, I guess. After our game that we filmed, he showed me like a very early version of the Naganadel control, and I said, "Hey, I'll play against it." And I played him with the Egg Rowlet, and he
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely steamrolled me. And I was like, I got interested by that, but he didn't have like hand block components. It was basically just energy denial,
Okay.
and so I kind of like took the deck. I didn't really talk to him much after it about the deck, but I put in a lot of time with the deck. I played it at the DC Open, And I kind of came up with the idea that you can like combine handlock and energy denial and draw support all in one, just like Zoro control. And then I just kind of refined the list from there, and I think I finally ended up finding the perfect 60.
Cool, great. Yeah, the list is definitely a lot to take in for a person just looking at it for the first time. Um, what would you say the deck's best 3 matchups are?
Definitely the best matchup I think is Blacephalon. Second best and third best are probably tied Pikarom and Ability Reshi. They're probably those are probably the best ones.
Okay, cool. So, does Ability Reshi's Nine Tails gusting, does that not give you a problem usually?
That actually I think if they're gusting with Ninetales, they're wrong. They're wasting energy. That's
Okay,
wrong. Yeah.
okay, cool. And then what would the deck's absolute worst matchup be?
You can't beat Nagquag. It's like impossible unless you like snipe. All right, so the only way you beat Nagquag is if you start sniping them off with the Whoopers off with Naganadel really early,
Mm-hmm.
and you never really give them the option to get Quagsire going. And then once that happens, then you can lock something with Retreat in the active. But it's very, very hard. It's like really hard to pull off.
Right, so
But
they would
that's a
probably
different.
need a slow start, right? And you'd need a really
Yeah,
good start.
they need a slow start, and you need a mediocrely fast start, and it needs to just all fall your way. It's something you can actually win the matchup, unlike Pidgeotto. Like Pidgeotto cannot win the matchup, but you can. It's just really, really hard.
Okay, yeah, that's understandable. So you did play this at AC, and you made day 2. What was your record going into day 2, and what was your record after day 2?
In day going into day 2, I was 504, and then after day 2, I was 725. But in day 2, I made like a major misplay early on, which kind of caught my I kind of got on a tilt after that. So
Okay, okay. So your day 2 record was 2-2-1.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. And then what archetypes did you play against day 1 and day 2 combined? And then after you list those, we'll talk about the matchups.
So I played against. I have it pulled up over here. Ability Zard, Pikarom, Fossil, Malamar, Guardian, Blacephalon, Green Zard, Mewbox, and Pidgeotto.
Okay, start wherever you want. You can either talk about how the matchup generally goes or any unique things that happened within your matchups at the tournament.
Okay, so Ability Reshi, I went 301 against. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just get a Heatran in the active, and because a lot of Ability Rushes are players think that Heatran's the best way of going about dealing with a Rangaroo because it just hits for a clean 130 and they take knockouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it seems great, but then Cold Crush comes down and they're like, yeah, I just lost. So that's usually what happens there. The one I tied against was in day 2, and he actually got extremely, extremely lucky. He had it was turn 1 or 2 of time, I forget. It was in time. But he had a 5-card hand. I Marsed him. I hit a Pokecom, and the other 4 cards were 2 Fire Energy, Welder, Switch, and he
Oh.
went into his Victini, and I lost because of that. And those were the last 2 Fire Energy in his deck.
Wow. So if you hit
Yeah.
one of those fire, or probably the welder, or maybe even the switch, I guess.
Yeah,
If you hit any of the other cards.
that's a win. Yeah,
Wow.
that was game 2, and he came away with the tie because of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then the other ones, were they pretty convincing? The other 3 matches?
Oh, it wasn't even close. Yeah.
Cool, cool. So definitely comfortable against the ability Zards after this tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and then next on the list would be?
So I played against Blacephalon twice. I went 2-0 against it. The general strategy for this matchup is to lock either a what's it called, the Ultra Conversion guy, or Blacephalon itself in the active. You kind of want to just Crushing Hammer as much as you can, I guess, and just kind of like use your custom catchers efficiently to try and bring stuff up that they don't want there, and and they have to lost zone energy, so they run out pretty quickly because they have to use 3 per guru. The correct way to play the matchup, which my day 2 opponent did, but my day 1 opponent did not, is that you're supposed to bursting burn to make the math better. So shout out to Joshua Sutherland. Yeah, so he was bursting burning me, and it made it a little more difficult, but it's still a pretty favorable matchup because it's just kind of hard for them to catch up after you're like crushing hammering their stuff.
Now, if they were to set up just 4 Naganadels, can you beat that? Or 3 Naganadels?
Yeah, you just attack them and they're kind of slower. Like they only do 80 damage.
Okay, so you would swing with a Venom Shot, then Resource Management, then Venom Shot.
And then you switch into a different Venom Shot guy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know the strategy versus Pidgey is just set up all Naganadels, but they're also not doing damage unless they have an Articuno going.
Yeah, like for this deck, you just like if they do that, you just start swinging, and then their board looks pretty weak.
Cool, sounds good. And the next matchup.
I went 1-0 against Pikarom. This matchup's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it's like it really this matchup is why you play the Baby Buzz for obvious reasons. It's just a huge threat on like just when you reveal the Baby Buzz and the Rainbow Energy combo, it's just really threatening, so that like they really have to try to play around the 4 prize turn, and you just punish them and they lose. And that's another main reason why I like this deck better than Pidgeotto, because just that option to just one-shot a Pikarom is ridiculous. So it forces them to play around certain positions in the game, and like even not only that, the Articuno is just a major threat to lock something with 3 energy in the active. I mean, 3 energy retreat cost in the active. I mean, even with Zeraora, it's like it's still like hard for them to keep up when you're just like kind of crushing hammering their stuff away.
Yeah.
They have their Coco for like obviously, and I do believe that the correct way to play the matchup is to full voltage GX on their end and not tag bolt.
Yeah.
But every Pikarom player I've ever played against, I think they've tag bolted me. So
now, do you usually take 6 prizes, or do you knock out a Pika and then lock them until they deck out?
It depends on board state, because sometimes it takes them a lot to play around the Baby Buzzwole turn, so they might go into it, and if they do that, then you take prizes and win. Or just the Baby Buzz knockout alone can just make their board state so horrendous that you can just take over board control and start hand locking them. But I think more of the time you're controlling them, and Baby Buzz is just like a threat.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Next matchup?
Let's see. Malamar, yeah. This matchup is probably the most interesting. The one I tied was Alex Szymanski, and I misplayed to tie that game. It was game 2, and it was getting really close to time. I definitely think I misplayed.
Was this in day 1 then?
Day 1, yeah.
Right, he didn't day 2. Okay.
I did day 2.
No, Alex didn't.
Oh, he didn't day 2, yeah. So the Malamar matchup usually obviously you just lock a Malamar in the active, like that's what you do. But I feel like most Malamar players think that that's your only win condition, but then they forget that their Giratina has 3 retreat costs, and you just Articuno that. And that caught Alex Szymanski off guard in game 1, but after playing game 1, he kind of learned how to play the matchup, and he played it a little differently. I mean, I don't really want to give out how to play the matchup, because I'm playing the deck again in Knoxville.
Okay.
So Malamar players, I'm not going to tell you how to beat me, but you can do it.
Yeah,
if the Malamar player knows what they're doing, then the matchup becomes a little more unfavorable.
Is that what Alex did in game 2 then?
Yeah.
Okay. So going in against this deck, I know we're not done the matchups yet, but going in against this deck, I imagine your opponents take half the game figuring out what to do, or what they're even playing against?
Yeah, they have no clue most of the time.
Okay, so it might be a little bit more on the radar for Knoxville now, but I highly doubt this is on people's testing
Oh yeah,
tables that they're running games
I,
against.
there's no way this is on the radar.
Okay, so after Malamar, what's did you play against one Malamar or two?
Two, I went 1-0-1 against it.
Okay, and then the one that was not Alex Shemansky, did you 2-0 that or 1-0 it or?
I beat him the first game, and the second game, as soon as I cold crushed, he scooped. So
You cold crushed the Tina?
yeah.
Wow. Nice.
All right, so the next matchup, that would be Fossil Box. I tied it. That's not a real matchup, I know, but Fossil Box versus Nag Control.
Yeah.
But it's very strange because their whatever it's called, the Aerodactyl makes your Oranguru cost 2 energy to resource manage. It's really inconvenient, but on 4 prize turn, what I found is that it's really nice to just Pheromosa and knock that thing out. Like, that hurts them a lot.
Okay, and did you tie in game 1 or game 3?
Game 1, I didn't draw anything. Literally just drew past.
Okay.
Game 2, I smashed him with Pheromosa and took that game. In game 3, I had game on board in turn 3 of time, and it was over.
Oh man, that sucks.
Yeah, but the main strategy is just get rid of their fighting energy, and then they can't really do anything.
Okay, yeah, that's not too hard. They play like 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think 5 was the one I played against, but after doing that in game 2, he scooped it up.
Okay.
The next matchup I think was Guardian. Oh yeah, the Guardian. That's the thing I misplayed against in
day 2.
Yeah. So basically, game 1 I didn't draw anything. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
I literally did not draw cards game 1. Game 2, I got, I think, all 4 Nag and 2 Oranguru up, and I was just cooking that game.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just steamrolled that game. Game 3, this is where I misplayed into the loss. So basically, we were in a board state where I trapped the guy with no energy in the active and the Guardian. And I started the lock. He was at 1 prize. And I found myself in the situation where I chipped him into 3 good cards, which is something you never want to hear.
Okay.
But and looking back on it, only 2 of them were actually good, and I was tunnel visioned and I put the wrong one on top. But
okay. Yeah, that
basically
happens.
what happened was he had a Diantha in there, but I forgot that they need to knock something out for Diantha to be playable.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there was a switch in his
or
discard
you need to
pile.
knock something out for it to be playable.
Yeah, right. So there was a switch in his discard pile, and I just expected, Diantha, he's gonna get switch out of his discard and win.
Got it.
So if I put Diantha on top, the lock would have been continued, and I most likely would have had that game. But instead, I decided to put Super Scoop up on top for whatever reason.
And he got heads.
Flip heads, yeah.
Yeah.
That was, and then that kind of put me on tilt for the rest of day 2, and that was my first round.
Oh, man. So that was the weird Guardian you played against. Playing
the
Mina.
Mina. Yeah.
And were they also playing a baby Mimikyu, or was this a different? Okay. Yeah, so I know the list that you played against then.
The Mina was actually really scary as well. Like that got rolling really quickly.
Yeah, that's like the worst scenario
of
a Guardian you could play against.
He went like turn 1, attach Mina, and he was like, "Your go." I was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, you're like, "What's happening here?"
Yeah. The next matchup. Hold on, let me check my list. Oh yeah, Pidgeotto, we just like tied. that
was Connor Foster, right?
Yeah, Connor.
Yeah,
Foster.
I talked to him after the game. He was like, I played against Rudy, and he's playing that Nag control thing, and he wanted to try playing it out, and then halfway into the game, he's like, "Yeah, this is a tie."
Yeah. There was like, we played it all the way to time actually, and I still had like 35 cards left.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So that was a tie. I played against a Mew box. That was another one. I tied against it in day 1. Game 1, he actually. All right, so I'm gonna give away the secret here. All right, guys, this is the secret. If you're playing Mew box and you stumble across a Nag control, you're supposed to clear vision GX, and that's exactly what he did. And I couldn't Articuno him, and that felt really bad.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, and game 2, very early on, I was able to Turbo Strike. I mean, not Turbo Strike. I was able to Injection GX his Turbo Strike into the prizes, so he couldn't accelerate energy onto the bench, and I was able to lock a Dedenne up and mill him that way. Then we just didn't have enough time for game
cheeky.
3. Yeah, that was super cheeky. I like that a lot.
I bet he didn't.
He didn't. Yeah, we finished game 2, and then I was just like, yeah, there's not enough time. You want ID? And he said, sure.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was probably my huge big brain play of the weekend.
And is that the last matchup you had?
The last one is Green Zard. So game 1, I demolished him, and game 2 and 3 he put Power Plant down, and I didn't draw.
Okay, and so this was day 2?
Yeah, day 2.
Okay. So is Power Plant usually a big deal for you?
Power Plant's a huge deal, but if you can bounce it, so the matchup, the decks that play Power Plant, if you can manage to bounce the Power Plants, the matchups are extremely, extremely favorable. But if you can't, it's rough.
Yeah, because Green Zard's pretty favorable for control decks.
Yeah, Green Zard is very favorable if you can bounce the Power Plant, and Guardian only plays 9 energy, so if you bounce the Power Plants, you win.
Right, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So before we get into our closing questions here, just for people who aren't familiar with these kind of control decks with the Stamp and the Chip and the Mars, just explain what is your end goal here? Like, what is the combo that you do at the end of the game that just loops until your opponent decks out?
Okay, so basically what you want is you want to have 1 Mars already in your hand, and then you want to shuffle back Reset Stamp, and you want your only 3 cards left, not against Mewbox because they have the Macargo thingy to just mill 5. Don't do this against Mewbox.
Right.
But you want Reset Stamp on top, and then the other 2 don't matter, but it's Mars and Chip Ice Axe.
Okay, so you resource manage Stamp, Mars, Chip.
And you want a Mars already in hand so that when you top deck Reset Stamp, you can play the Reset Stamp, Mars, draw your last 2, and then Chip. And then you'll have the Mars for next turn.
Got it. And so basically, when does Lieutenant Surge come into that?
Lieutenant Surge is mostly so you can Surge double Mars to start chipping away at their hand earlier if you want to establish lock sooner. And it's also so that you can like switch with Tate and Liza and Mars in the same turn, or Broxcrit and Mars in the same turn, because you want to keep replenishing your Ultra Beast so that you can keep trading with Naganadel.
Mm-hmm.
So Surge is actually very, very key. It's one of my favorite cards in the deck. It's broken. But yeah, the combo, basically the whole idea behind it is that you're shuffling their card back in deck that they drew. The bad card. You're giving them a new card to Mars away. So that could hopefully be a good card. You're randomly giving them a card out of their deck that you're going to discard that same turn. So eventually, by random probability, you're going to get rid of most of their materials that they're going to need to win the game. And you're going to Chip Ice Axe to make sure that what they're drawing is not what they need.
Cool. So moving forward, going to Knoxville, you've already said that this is likely going to be the deck you're piloting there. Are there any major changes for people that might want to try this deck out themselves?
Honestly, I think this is the perfect 60. I don't think you're going to get a better build than this from anybody. Yeah.
Cool.
It's such a good build.
Great. Well, thank you for being on the channel, Rudy. Do you have any shout outs?
Shout out the music career. Yeah, that's about it.
All right. Make sure you check out Rudy. His Twitter is Rudy Wade Music, and his YouTube is Rudy Wade TCG. He does things like deck profiles, special guests, meta discussions, and all of that jazz. Definitely suggest going dropping him a subscribe and a follow. Be sure to check out flipsidegaming.com. Use code Celio, all caps, for 10% off of your next order. Subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.